The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 921. Kiran! Nelson Carter and others instinctively shouted. Ignoring their shock and fear, Kiran York looked coldly at Nelson and said, "Nelson, it seems the deaths of your son and daughter mean nothing to you, right?" Nelson, having regained his composure, his face changing expressions multiple times, looked at Kiran with venom in his eyes and coldly said, This is a Carter family matter. Do you think you should interfere?" Toby Carter, seeing this as a perfect opportunity to showcase himself as the soon-to-be head of the family, stood up proudly and walked towards Kiran, saying, "You want to help two uneducated people? What gives you the right?" Could it be that you are also uneducated?" Toby sneered at Kiran. Slap! With an icy expression, Kiran raised his hand and slapped Toby. "Say that again." Toby's words had infuriated Kiran. Toby felt half of his face go numb and cried out in pain. He never expected Kiran to resort to violence so swiftly and unexpectedly. Kiran's face remained cold as he stared at Toby. "Speak! You think hitting people randomly isn't against the law?" "I'm calling the police," Toby said, trying to muster courage as he faced the family's many eyes upon him, feeling humiliated and angry. "Give him a phone so he can call the police," Kiran said to Joshua Carter. Joshua handed his phone to Toby. "Go ahead, call them." Toby took the phone, his face icy, and said, "You think I won't dare? I'll call right now." "Stop." Nelson suddenly spoke coldly to stop him. Toby was stunned, looking at Nelson. "Grandfather, he's too arrogant." "Shouldn't we?" Nelson glared at Toby with dissatisfaction. Of course, he knew about Kiran's arrogance. Kiran's arrogance was no secret. His face turned grim as he looked at Kiran. "Kiran, what exactly do you want?" "I want Joshua to become the head of the Carter family," Kiran said. "Dream on! Impossible!" Toby shouted first, afraid his position would be taken. "Why not? My brother is a true Carter. What are you?" Sophia Carter rebuked angrily. "What good is being a true Carter if you're beasts? Should we let beasts lead the family?" Toby's harsh words were aimed at Sophia, continually glancing at Nelson, hoping he wouldn't change his mind. "Kiran, interfering in our family matters, isn't that a bit much?" Nelson said coldly. Kiran shook his head and laughed. "Not at all." Stepping forward, he looked around at the Carter family. "Your matters are yours. Joshua and Sophia's are theirs. They are unrelated." "Unrelated? Then why are you trying to take the family head position?" Toby yelled. "I want Joshua to establish a new Carter family and become its head. Isn't that possible?" Kiran laughed as if looking at an idiot. Joshua and Sophia were stunned, joy and surprise on their faces. They truly had no desire to be the head of this family, too disappointed. Nelson felt like a knife had been stabbed in his chest at the mention of a new Carter family. It was the greatest insult, and his anger surged uncontrollably. "Kiran, as an outsider, what gives you the right to interfere in Carter family matters?" Nelson asked, emphasizing his status. "Our Dragon City Carter family matters are not your concern." "Dragon City Carter family?" Kiran sneered. "The Carter family that has its daughter and son-in-law colluding with the Romance Nation being their lapdogs?" "You," Nelson fumed, his dignity shattered. "Because you are now someone else's dogs, no longer considered part of the Carter family. That's why I want Joshua to establish a new Carter family to replace you." Kiran explained with a cold laugh, pointing at Toby. "You are officially a new puppy now. You are talking nonsense." Toby was enraged, humiliated, and furious. "Nelson, are you a lapdog of the Romance Nation?" Kiran asked mockingly. Nelson's face contorted, unsure how to respond. "If you're not a lapdog, announce to everyone here that you have no ties to the Romance Nation's Elton," Kiran pressed. Nelson's face turned red and white, unable to speak. "I have no ties to the Romance Nation. Elton is the real dog," Joshua suddenly declared seriously. Nelson was taken aback, furious, pointing at Joshua. Joshua stood tall. "Our Carter family will never be dogs for the Romance Nation." Kiran smiled approvingly. He looked at Toby. "You want to be head? Say something similar." Toby's face turned sour, feeling humiliated, unsure what to say. Kiran sneered, looking at Nelson and Toby. "What? Do you want to be dogs?" "Kiran, this is our family matter. Shut up!" Nelson was furious, yelling at Kiran to vent his anger. Kiran smirked, addressing the guests. "Do you want to be associated with dogs?" The guests' faces changed, looking uncomfortable. They never expected Kiran to refer to dogs repeatedly. As humans, they naturally didn't want to be associated with dogs, feeling awkward. "Kiran, get lost!" Toby shouted in anger. Bang! Kiran stepped forward and kicked Toby. "Get lost!" "Ah!" Toby screamed as he flew several meters like a ball, landing with a thud, crying out in pain. Is that a dog barking? Kiran sneered mockingly. Joshua and Sophia felt immensely satisfied. Nelson was trembling with rage. Damn it! At that moment, harsh words in dragon language came from the Carter villa. Then, 7 or 8 tall white men in suits, all looking handsome and angry, stormed out. Seeing these people, Kiran's sneer deepened. Finally, the dogs showed up. He was making a scene to draw these dogs out. Without these dogs, where would the Carter family get their confidence? Come on! I like to beat dogs, Kiran said, walking towards them. Chapter 922. Kill him, one of the Caucasians shouted, leading the charge with a swing aimed at Kiran York's head. Kiran didn't dodge. Instead, he moved forward to meet the punch. With a slight shift of his right shoulder, he collided with the man's chest. Crack! The sound of breaking bones echoed as the man screamed in agony, blood spurting from his mouth. His body flew backward like a kite with a broken string. The other Caucasians who were ready to attack froze in place, their faces pale with fear, unsure of what to do next. They clenched their fists tightly but didn't move. Kiran stepped forward, his gaze sharp as he looked at them. Come on, your friend is down. Don't you want to avenge him? Ridicule! His tone was mocking, taunting, filled with derision. The men felt a deep sense of humiliation but lacked the courage to step forward. Kiran York, you dare to come to our Carter family and hurt our people? Do you really think we're easy to bully? Nelson Carter shouted at him. Is the Carter family hard to bully? Kiran responded with a cold laugh. Nelson's face turned red with anger, but he couldn't find the words to retort. Kiran pushed him aside, saying, I'll deal with you later. Nelson stumbled, almost blown away by a gust of wind, and stood off to the side, dazed. Kiran moved towards the group of Caucasians, disdain written all over his face. Come on, attack, one of them yelled, gathering the courage to rush at Kiran. Kiran sprang forward, using both his hands and feet. With a series of swift, powerful movements, he knocked them all to the ground. Cries of pain filled the air, contrasting sharply with the elegant music still playing in the background, making the scene even more brutal and harrowing. Nelson stood there, his mouth moving but no words coming out. Kiran turned to him. I've dealt with your dogs. Now call out their master. Nelson was stunned, his face changing colors, but he said nothing. His eyes glanced towards the house. What? Still not coming out? Kiran sneered. Don't think I don't know that Els is here. Otherwise, how would you dare hold such a meeting? Nelson's face turned pale with fear as he looked at Kiran. Tell Els to come out or the Carter family will be in trouble today, Kiran called towards the villa. Who? Came a harsh voice in Dragonsland language. A tall black man emerged, holding a woman tightly. His face was filled with malice, his eyes blazing with anger. The grip on the woman was so tight it seemed her bones might break, her clothes disheveled and revealing. Sophia Carter recognized the woman and turned to Toby Carter. Toby, isn't that your girlfriend Lucy Goss? The woman gasped in shock and lowered her head in shame. Toby's face went pale. Everyone present at the Carter family meeting was stunned. It was clear that Lucy had just been with the black man. The crowd looked at Toby with disbelief. The future head of the Carter family is so generous, giving his woman to others? Kiran mocked. Toby was utterly humiliated and tried to argue. We've already broken up. Are you breaking up with me, Toby? Lucy cried out in surprise and anger. Yes! Toby cursed her stupidity but had no choice but to continue. Toby, you're heartless. I slept with Els to help you become the head of the family, and now you don't want me? Lucy sobbed. Toby was completely disgraced and didn't know how to respond. I'll return this woman to you when I'm done, Els said arrogantly. This statement shocked everyone. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Is this even a man? The level of humiliation Toby was enduring was unimaginable. Don't worry, Els. Toby will agree, Nelson assured him. Els smiled, satisfied. I want this woman to bear my child. He tightened his grip on Lucy, reminiscing about their time together. Toby was furious, feeling completely humiliated and unsure of what to say. No problem. Rest assured, Nelson agreed again. The onlookers were horrified by what they were witnessing. Kiran laughed in disbelief, then turned to Nelson. You really are the epitome of a lackey. You are the best of the best among all the dogs. Nelson wasn't offended by the insult. Instead, he looked at Els and said, This is Kiran York. Els' eyes turned cold. Ignoring Kiran, he looked at Sophia and said, I want to sleep with that woman. Dream on, Sophia instinctively shouted. Shut up! Nelson snapped at Sophia. Turning to Els, he said, This is my granddaughter, Sophia Carter. It's an honor that you're interested in her. Els laughed heartily, giving Nelson a thumbs up. I enjoy working with people like you. You give me hope and make things easy. This partnership is perfect. Thank you for your kind words, Els, Nelson responded, fawning like a lapdog. He then turned to Sophia. You must keep Els happy. Sophia's body trembled. Just moments ago, Toby was to be the family head, and she was not considered part of the Carter family. Now, to appease Els, Nelson claimed she was his granddaughter. The hypocrisy was extreme. Dream on. My affairs are none of your business, and you have no right to interfere. Sophia protested. Joshua Carter stepped forward and glared at Nelson. You're utterly shameless. Shut you up. Nelson yelled back. The Carter family follows my orders. If you don't like it, leave. From now on, you'll have nothing to do with us. He turned to Toby. You must ensure Els is pleased. Toby, though humiliated, had made up his mind. Becoming the head of the family meant everything. Women were secondary. He nodded. Don't worry, grandfather. Els, pleased with their conversation, looked at Sophia with arrogance. Girl, becoming my woman isn't easy. Opportunities like this don't come often. Indeed, they don't, Kiran said with a cold smile, walking towards Els. His killing intent was palpable. Chapter 923. One can be shameless, but few reach the level of shamelessness that Nelson Carter has. One can be domineering, but few are as domineering as Els, who snatches other people's women. Kiran York was infuriated by the shamelessness and tyranny of these two to the point where he wanted to kill them both and let them suffer eternal damnation. At that moment, he wished he could end their lives, never to be redeemed. Els saw Kiran approaching and didn't show any fear. Instead, he kissed Lucy Goss on her red lips and let her go, saying, Baby, wait for me. After I kill him, we'll continue our fun. Lucy trembled, her face pale as if she had seen a monster. Els, feeling accomplished, loosened his neck and body and walked towards Kiran. Do you think defeating the Sunland Ninja Association and beating those Park Sung-nam losers makes you invincible? Els taunted with a sneer. Beating you will be easy. As Kiran spoke, he raised his fist and swung it towards Els. Els showed no fear, swinging his fist to meet Kiran's punch. Bang! A dull sound echoed through the air as their fists collided. Both men felt a numbing, aching pain. Kiran was slightly shocked, observing Els, who was completely unharmed and whose arms seemed much stronger. Seeing Kiran's surprise, Nelson's eyes gleamed with pride. Kiran, today you will learn what a true powerhouse is. He looked at Els and said, Mr. Els, you must teach Kiran a lesson he won't forget. Don't worry, Mr. Carter, Els said. His body relaxed, as if killing Kiran was effortless. If you kill Kiran, my granddaughter is yours too, Nelson promised. Kiran now understood that Nelson was trying to curry favor with Els, knowing his martial strength, even at the cost of Lucy Goss, and even offering Sophia Carter to Els. Kiran despised Nelson's shamelessness even more. He was, however, shocked by Els's strength. Why was Els so powerful? Els looked at Kiran, full of energy and confidence, and said, Come on, let's continue. He swung another punch at Kiran. They clashed again, both taking 2 steps back. Els remained unscathed, growing more confident. Ha, this is getting interesting. I will kill you. Els began attacking faster, and Kiran started to counterattack. However, Kiran hadn't used his full strength, curious about Els's power. They fought for over 10 minutes without a clear winner. Snow Xander, sitting in the car, grew anxious. She was used to Kiran being incredibly strong and had never seen him struggle like this. She got out of the car and ran towards Kiran, her eyes filled with fear and concern. Els, in the middle of the fight, noticed Snow. She looked like a fairy to him, with her perfect figure and stunning beauty. Els felt a rush of excitement. After a few punches, Els stepped back and said to Snow, I want to sleep with you. Snow was startled, looking at Kiran and shouting, Honey! Kiran's anger was about to explode. He moved to Snow's side. Are you okay, honey? Snow asked with concern. I'm fine, Kiran replied. Is she your wife? Els asked, pointing at Kiran. Yes, Kiran replied with a cold smile. I will kill you, Els said, his tone suddenly firm. Kiran sneered. Els, even more arrogant, said, I will sleep with her. He licked his lips and looked at Snow. Wait for me. Els laughed as he walked towards Kiran, his eyes fixed on Snow like she was a precious treasure. Kiran, hand over your wife to Mr. Els or you won't leave here alive today, Toby Carter taunted, venting his earlier humiliation. Kiran, you have so many women around you. Giving away your wife is no big deal. You can sleep with others, Nelson added, fanning the flames and reminding Els that Kiran had many beautiful women. As expected, Els' eyes lit up with excitement and anticipation. Snow trembled with anger and disgust, unable to bear Els's lecherous gaze, stepping back in fear. Seeing Snow uncomfortable, Kiran felt a pang of heartache. He stepped forward, shielding Snow, and said to Els, You want to sleep with my wife? Yes. Els nodded arrogantly. I'll kill you and then sleep with her. You won't get the chance, Kiran said, stepping forward. Els showed no fear, thinking that Kiran's strength was mediocre. I'll use my full power now. With a powerful punch, Els's strong presence swept toward Kiran. Kiran sneered, meeting Els's punch head-on. Bang! A loud sound echoed, and Els's body flew out like a broken kite. He hit the ground with a thud, screaming in pain. Ah! Toby gasped in shock. Even Nelson was stunned, not expecting Els to be knocked away by a single punch from Kiran. Els had seemed so strong, and Kiran appeared to be at a disadvantage. How could Els have failed? Els coughed up blood and struggled to sit up, clutching his chest. Impossible! This is impossible! Kiran laughed lightly. You're no match for me. Don't bother trying. He looked at Nelson mockingly. Els is no match for me. I could crush him with one foot. Nelson's face changed, a complex look in his eyes. Everyone was curious, not understanding what Kiran meant. Why had Kiran, who seemed so powerful, held back? Toby looked at Nelson. Grandfather, maybe we should. Nelson glared at Toby, silencing him. Keep taking your medicine. Kiran sneered, looking at Nelson and Els. Their faces changed drastically. Chapter 924 Medicine? The crowd looked at Kiran York, puzzled by what he was talking about. Nelson Carter, trying to control his emotions, looked at Kiran and feigned ignorance. What medicine? What nonsense are you talking about? Toby Carter, hearing Nelson's words, felt disappointed. He had already lost face and deeply wished for Kiran to be killed, even hoping for Sophia Carter and Snow Xander to be taken by EL so he wouldn't be the only one humiliated. Kiran ignored Nelson's denial and walked toward Els. Els, who was injured, had somewhat recovered. He pushed himself up from the ground. Smack! Smack! Kiran reached him, grabbed Els by the collar and slapped him twice. Ah! Els screamed like a wild animal, spitting out blood, making his teeth look bloody and grotesque like a zombie's. Els glared at Kiran, yelling, I'm going to kill you! Spitting on Els's face, Kiran replied, You worthless scum! I've already beaten you like a dog. What makes you think you can kill me? You! Els felt deeply humiliated. He turned to Nelson and shouted, The medicine! Give me the medicine! Nelson's head buzzed with anxiety. Hearing Els's plea for the medicine shocked everyone again, making them look at Nelson with curiosity and astonishment. Nelson, flustered and anxious, signaled Els to stop talking. Els, however, grew more desperate and angry. He had gained his strength from the Carter family's experimental medicine, which had enhanced his abilities during the fight. This was why Nelson was so eager to please Els, offering even Toby's girlfriend and potentially Sophia. However, this medicine was illegal. Nelson, caught between his desire to eliminate Kiran and the fear of exposure, hesitated. Now that Els was shouting in front of everyone, he was so nervous that he did not dare to give it to him. Give me the medicine, if I kill Kiran York. Els was about to go crazy and continued to shout, If I give you the medicine, you'll have the ability to kill me? Kiran York sneered in disdain. Right! Els didn't know that Kiran York was deliberately provoking him. He thought about how he had been on par with Kiran York just now. The reason why he was suddenly defeated must be because the medicine had worn off. Els now firmly believed that as long as he was given medicine, he could kill Kiran York. Nelson Carter was in a dilemma. His gaze kept changing between Kiran York and Els. He yearned to kill Kiran York, but he was afraid that this medicine would make the Carter family notorious. If Els could guarantee to kill Kiran York now, he would not hesitate to give him medicine to help him kill Kiran York. That way, even if others found out, it wouldn't matter. However, what if he couldn't? Thinking of this possibility, Nelson Carter was afraid and hesitant. Els, not getting the medicine, grew frantic. He yanked Kiran's hand, shouting, Let go! I need to get the medicine from Nelson. Go ahead, Kiran sneered, releasing him. Els, freed, angrily marched towards Nelson. Seeing Els's madness, Nelson became nervous. Mr. Els, the medicine! Damn you! Els cursed, slapping Nelson twice. Nelson spat out blood, his teeth falling to the ground, his face swelling like a balloon. In his traditional tang suit, Nelson now looked as miserable as a beaten dog. Give me the medicine! Els roared, his eyes burning with rage. Nelson, trembling with fear, was paralyzed. Grandfather, Toby shouted to remind Nelson. Nelson stammered, Mr. Els, calm down that. Calm down my ass! Els retorted, slapping Nelson again. Nelson screamed in pain, vomiting blood, thoroughly disgraced. Els, relentless, demanded, Will you give it to me or not? Seeing Els's madness, Nelson feared for his life. He quickly agreed, Yes, I'll give it to you. He turned to Toby. Quickly, get the medicine for Mr. Els. Yes, grandfather, Toby replied excitedly, running back to the villa. Kiran looked at the battered, humiliated Nelson and couldn't help but sneer. Being a dog isn't easy, is it? Nelson, more humiliated by the mockery than the beating, could only endure it. At this moment, he felt lower than a dog. Nelson felt like he had lost all dignity, completely reduced to a fool. Els, turning to Kiran with venomous eyes, said, "Once I take the medicine, I'll kill you." "Go ahead," Kiran replied coldly, turning to Nelson. "I'm curious, what kind of magical medicine can enhance his strength?" Nelson, hearing Kiran's question, felt a chill. He knew their secret was about to be exposed. "Got it!" Toby ran out excitedly, holding a white crystal bottle with a blue liquid inside. The blue liquid shimmered ominously in the sunlight, giving off a terrifying aura. Everyone was curious. Els, seeing the blue medicine, looked at it like it was his lifeline, quickly grabbing it from Toby. Holding the medicine, Els felt ecstatic. His black, swollen face twisted with excitement. He looked at Kiran and said, "Once I drink this, you'll die a horrible death." Kiran smirked, ignoring Els's idiocy, and turned to Nelson. "Did your Carter family develop medicine just to create something like this? Developing such a medicine?" Everyone was stunned, looking at Nelson. Kiran's words were like a stone thrown into a pond, causing ripples of shock. Nelson's face paled, constantly changing colors. Kiran turned to Joshua Carter. Forming a new Carter family was a wise decision. Joshua nodded firmly. "Young Master York, rest assured, I won't let you down. His position as the head of the family was being threatened." Toby, feeling deeply provoked, shouted angrily, "We are the Carter family. We have advanced medical skills and medicines. We have the power to conquer all." "Ah." Els's howl interrupted Toby's outburst. Everyone turned to see Els, whose body was sprouting black hair. Chapter 925. Els at this moment was like a crazed demon. His eyes appeared dazed as he continuously scanned his surroundings, showing no signs of feeling or awareness. Blood-tinged saliva dripped from his mouth, making him look even more terrifying than an evil spirit. Some people at the scene, unable to bear the sight, ran to the side and started vomiting. Nelson Carter was thoroughly panicked, his face pale as he shouted, "Mr. Els, how do you feel?" "Ah." Els did not respond with words, only letting out a crazed scream, clearly having lost his sanity. Seeing this, Toby Carter retreated in fear, his legs trembling. "Doesn't the Carter family boast advanced medical skills and medicines, claiming the power to conquer everything? Then hurry up and use them!" Kiran York taunted, looking at Toby. Toby was at a loss, his face as white as paper. Nelson's body was trembling uncontrollably as he stepped back. "Nelson Carter, Toby Carter, you are the heads of the Carter family, the representatives. You claim there is no room for a new Carter family. So why are you scared now? Where is your resolve?" Kiran mocked. Nelson and Toby felt a burning humiliation as if they were being slapped, but they kept retreating in fear. "Ah." Els continued to scream loudly, his eyes vacant, walking aimlessly towards people. Seeing Els's state, many people started screaming and running in panic. "Els has gone mad. If he isn't killed, he will go on a killing spree," Kiran warned the crowd. "Dear God." Someone couldn't handle the pressure, crying out. The more they reacted, the more excited and crazed Els became. "You need the Carter family to save you now," Kiran reminded them. While running, the crowd shouted, "Nelson Carter, do something to control Els. What kind of medicine did you give Els?" "Nelson, save us!" The guests who had come for the Carter family meeting were now in utter chaos, verging on madness. Looking at the crazed Els, Nelson was stomping his feet in frustration. He knew it was the side effects of the excessive medicine intake, but didn't know what to do. A woman was caught by Els, who drooled as he leaned in to kiss her. The woman, seeing this, screamed and fainted. The woman's boyfriend tried to save her but was kicked away by Els. The crowd was in even more of a panic, wanting to flee but finding their legs uncooperative. Many stood trembling, barely able to move their feet. Kiran looked at Nelson. "It seems you want everyone to die at the Carter family estate." The crowd felt a deep sense of despair. "Nelson Carter, save my wife." A man, clutching his stomach, cried out. Nelson was utterly desperate, stamping his foot and shouting, "I have no solution. This hormone drug just finished development and we haven't mastered it yet." "Hormone drug?" someone exclaimed. Nelson, with no other choice, nodded. "Yes, it's a drug developed from animal and plant proteins to enhance human physical functions and unleash subconscious strength. But we don't know its full effects or antidotes." Hearing this, everyone felt even more hopeless and terrified. Els, now opening his mouth, moved to bite the woman's throat. "Save my wife," the man cried out in despair. "Young Master York, can you save her?" At the critical moment, Joshua Carter looked at Kiran, pleading anxiously. The man, seeing hope, knelt before Kiran, kowtowing and begging, "Young Master York, please save my wife." "I don't know you," Kiran replied, shaking his head. The man, stunned, looked at Joshua. Joshua was equally anxious. The man, reacting swiftly, kowtowed to Joshua, shouting, "Family Head Carter, please save my wife." Family Head Carter? Joshua and everyone present were momentarily stunned, but quickly they recalled Kiran's mention of the new Carter family. Seeing Elsa's terrifying behavior and fearing they might be next, the crowd turned to Joshua, shouting, "Family Head Carter, save us!" Nelson and Toby, hearing this, were filled with anger but didn't dare speak. "Young Master," Joshua, showing responsibility, looked at Kiran, pleading. Kiran surveyed the crowd. "Do you recognize Joshua as the family head?" "Yes," the crowd shouted, nodding like chickens pecking at grains. Joshua looked at Kiran with gratitude, knowing Kiran was helping establish his authority as the family head. He clenched his fists, feeling a surge of excitement and pride. Kiran turned to Nelson. "The new Carter family is established. Do you acknowledge it?" "Aye." Nelson, his face ashen with anger, wanted to refuse, but seeing the crowd's gaze, he swallowed his words. "Hurry and acknowledge it," the man, desperate to save his wife, shouted. Nelson, scared of inciting the crowd's wrath, reluctantly nodded. I acknowledge it." Saying this, he felt as if his body was hollowed out. Everything related to the Carter family was now irrelevant to him, losing all dignity and honor. Handing the family head position to someone the family least respected felt like the ultimate humiliation. However, he could only endure it. Joshua and Sophia Carter were elated, their faces filled with excitement and gratitude. Kiran, wasting no more time, leaped towards Els. Els, having licked the woman's neck, was about to bite down. Kiran reached him in time, landing a blow on his back. "Ow!" Els cried out in pain, collapsing to the ground. Kiran picked up the woman and threw her to her husband. The man, catching his unconscious wife, wept in relief, feeling like he had just escaped death. He was deeply grateful to Kiran. Els, getting up from the ground, saw Kiran and charged at him madly. Kiran kicked him away, landing him in front of a white man. Els, seeing his subordinate, showed no recognition and bit into the man's neck, sucking blood crazily. Els's subordinates were all horrified. After drinking the blood, Els seemed somewhat calmer, standing up and declaring, "Kiran, I will kill you!" Kiran sneered, looking at Nelson. "Your medicine is amazing. Drinking human blood actually calms him down." Nelson, hearing this, felt his head swell with anxiety. The crowd, feeling like they were facing a demon, kept retreating, their faces tense with fear. Els, now even more enraged, charged at Kiran. Chapter 926. Bang! Kiran York raised his fist and struck Els, sending him flying. Els landed next to another Caucasian who, seeing Els, turned and fled in terror. Els, feeling a burning heat inside him like a raging fire, leaped up and grabbed the Caucasian, frantically drinking his blood. This scene shocked everyone. Els had gone mad. Completely mad. Ignoring the crowd's reactions, Els seemed to regain his composure and awareness after drinking, then roared and charged at Kiran again. Kiran punched him away again, and Els landed next to another Caucasian, repeating the same scene. After drinking blood, he charged at Kiran again. Els had turned into a vampire, repeatedly being knocked away and killing his own subordinates to drink their blood. Seeing the corpses on the ground, the crowd felt as if they were being battered by a storm, filled with chaos and anxiety. They all looked at Kiran with pitiful eyes, hoping he would quickly kill Els to save their lives. Els stood up one last time, his belly bloated as if he had drunk countless bottles of beer. Thinking of the blood inside him, the crowd stepped back in fear, some faint-hearted women fainting in fright. Kiran looked at the pale-faced Nelson and Toby Carter, smiling as he said, "Your Carter family's medicine is truly amazing." Hearing this, the two men felt as if their hearts were being fried in oil. They didn't know how to respond to this medicine. More importantly, what would happen if Els didn't drink blood? Whose blood would he drink next? The two were terrified. Nelson lowered his head. Kiran continued to stare at Nelson's face and asked, "So, what now?" Nelson felt a chill. He knew Kiran was coming to settle accounts. He glanced at the white corpses on the ground and the approaching Els. He genuinely feared Kiran's next punch would send Els flying toward him, causing Els to drink his blood. The more Nelson thought about it, the more scared he became. His legs went weak, and he knelt before Kiran. "Young Master York, I was wrong. I shouldn't have helped the Romance Nation develop this medicine. I deserve to die. I deserve to die." Slap, slap. Nelson slapped his own face hard, his eyes full of self-blame and pleading. The crowd, already scared to death, became furious upon hearing this. Nelson Carter, you helped the Romance Nation develop this medicine? You're a damned traitor, a sellout! Kill Nelson Carter. Hearing the public's outrage, Nelson felt even colder inside, knowing he deserved to die and could not appease their anger. He looked at Kiran with pitiful eyes. Kiran said nothing, turning his gaze to Toby. Toby, scared, stepped back and asked, "Why are you looking at me?" Kiran remained silent, just staring at Toby. Nelson quickly understood Kiran's intention. He promptly said, his parents did business in the Romance Nation and were responsible for this project. The Romance Nation wanted Toby as the family head, so I arranged it. Hearing Nelson's confession, Toby knew his identity was exposed. He tried to escape. Els charged at Kiran, swinging his fists and shouting, "Kiran, I will—" Bang! Kiran punched Els away again. Els landed on top of the escaping Toby, pinning him down. Toby, scared out of his wits, fainted with his eyes rolled back. Els showed no mercy, biting Toby's neck and drinking his blood. Halfway through, Els's body began to convulse violently, his eyes rolling back. His body stiffened, then he collapsed to the ground with a thud. Kicking his legs twice, Els died. Even in death, Toby's eyes were wide open, filled with terror and disbelief. Seeing this, Nelson wet himself in fear. He looked at Kiran, waiting for him to decide his fate. The crowd felt a huge sense of relief, sitting down in exhaustion. Some even cried out of fear and relief. Kiran looked at Nelson. Nelson's body trembled like a sieve, unable to speak. After a long pause, Nelson crawled up, knelt before Kiran and kowtowed repeatedly. "Young Master York, I was wrong. I will never cooperate with the Romance Nation again. You no longer have the chance," Kiran interrupted, turning to Joshua Carter. "Joshua is now the head of the Carter family." I know, I acknowledge it," Nelson quickly said. "Your acknowledgement isn't needed," Kiran replied coldly. Nelson's face darkened, knowing he was utterly finished and that he had ruined himself. Befriending a wolf had led to such a tragic end. Joshua looked at Kiran with respect. Nelson knelt on the ground, thinking about being Joshua's grandfather, feeling increasingly awkward. One wrong step led to another. "Joshua, handle the remaining Carter family matters yourself," Kiran said. Joshua nodded vigorously, filled with excitement. Nelson looked at Joshua, pleading, "Joshua, I was foolish. If you have any conscience left, go see my father off," Joshua said, holding back his pain and anger. Hearing this, Nelson sighed in relief and quickly said, I'll go now." Joshua said nothing, just closing his eyes tightly. Nelson hurriedly got up and rushed outside. "We will also see Randall Carter off," the other rescued people said. The crowd followed, heading outside. Joshua and Sophia hadn't expected the others to follow. Knowing that Kiran had helped establish his authority, Joshua and Sophia looked at Kiran with gratitude. Kiran was satisfied with Joshua's handling of the situation. Having Joshua deal with Nelson was a test, and Joshua, despite his anger, hadn't forgotten Nelson was his grandfather. Having family ties meant having love. Kiran felt confident and trusting in Joshua's leadership of the Carter family. However, he was more curious about Macy Wendell. What kind of woman was she? Raising Joshua so well indicated she was a qualified mother, yet such a mother had killed her husband, Joshua Carter, in a cruel manner which was clearly abnormal. Kiran felt Macy was half human, half demon. The more he thought about it, the more curious he became, hoping to go to Sunland soon to find Lady Meiji and Macy to uncover the truth. "Thank you, young Master York. We're heading to the funeral home," Joshua said, bowing gratefully to Kiran. Kiran nodded. Sophia, tears in her eyes, looked at Kiran and Snow Xander with admiration, but she knew that some love wasn't meant for her. They left. Only Kiran and Snow remained. Snow, her body weak, was on the verge of fainting and kept retching. Kiran's eyes lit up. Was his wife pregnant? Chapter 927. Snow Xander noticed Kiran York's gaze and asked with a puzzled look, "What are you looking at?" "What's wrong?" "Wifey, are you pregnant?" Kiran asked, trying to control his excitement. Snow Xander rolled her eyes at Kiran and playfully scolded, "Aren't you a doctor? Shouldn't you be telling me?" Kiran slapped his forehead, realizing he had been too excited to think clearly. He quickly took Snow's wrist to check her pulse. After a few seconds, he removed his hand, his face becoming very serious. Snow became anxious and asked, "So, am I pregnant?" Kiran looked at Snow intently but didn't say anything. Snow grew even more worried. After all the effort they had put into being together, if she wasn't pregnant, wouldn't that be disappointing? "Hubby, hurry up and tell me. Am I pregnant or not?" "You are." Kiran couldn't help but laugh, seeing Snow's anxious expression. Snow realized Kiran was teasing her and became angry. She playfully swung her fists at him. "Kiran, you jerk! I'll beat you up!" Kiran laughed and dodged her playful punches. "Ouch!" Snow suddenly clutched her stomach and cried out. Kiran froze for a moment and quickly returned to her side. "What's wrong, honey?" Snow, holding back a laugh, didn't answer and just held her stomach. Kiran's concern turned to panic. "Honey, where does it hurt?" "Ah." Kiran suddenly felt a sharp pain under his arm. Looking down, he saw Snow's fair hand pinching his side, her face full of playful mischief, her eyes sparkling. Kiran realized he had been tricked. Snow waved her hand and said, "If you struggle hard, do you think you might cause me to miscarry?" Hearing the word miscarry, Kiran's head buzzed. He shook his head vigorously and said, "I won't struggle. I'll do as you say, wifey." Snow, pleased with his promise, patted his face and said, "That's more like it." Kiran's face was full of happiness, reminded of the cheerful, lively wife he had first fallen in love with. He lifted Snow into his arms. Snow naturally wrapped her arms around Kiran's neck, both of them smiling happily. Kiran leaned down and kissed Snow on the lips. Snow responded passionately. Their love for each other flowed, indifferent to the chaos and mess around them. After a long embrace, Kiran and Snow separated. "Wifey, I missed you." Seeing Kiran's expression, Snow knew what he was thinking. She rolled her eyes and said, "I'm feeling nauseous and might throw up." Kiran. Snow, feeling triumphant, wore a radiant smile. Kiran, disappointed, carried Snow to the car to drive home. Just as he was about to start the car, Snow gathered her hair, making Kiran's eyes widen in shock. "Big baddie," Snow scolded flirtatiously, then slowly leaned in. Kiran's eyes filled with surprise and happiness. 2 hours later, they arrived at Lindsay Ludwig's villa. Inside, they found Lillian Yanez and Yvonne Quinn sitting in the living room. The two women looked a bit flushed, as if embarrassed. Seeing Kiran, their eyes flashed with annoyance. Kiran thought of the love spell that connected the three of them and wondered if they knew about his and Snow's intimate moment. Yvonne winked at Kiran and then asked Snow, "Snow, do you prefer sour or spicy food?" Snow blushed and replied, "I don't feel like eating anything right now." Yvonne glared at Kiran. "Look at you. You've taken care of Snow so poorly that she's lost her appetite." Kiran wiped his forehead. This wasn't about care. It was about their wild passion just now. Snow, feeling embarrassed, wished she could disappear. She glared at Kiran and said, "I'm tired. I'm going to rest." She turned and went to her room. Lillian also stood up and went to her room. Yvonne leaned close to Kiran and teased, "You're quite naughty! Aren't you afraid your son will be malnourished?" Kiran felt overwhelmed and wanted to shut Yvonne's mouth. This crazy woman dared to say anything. He hated the love spell that left no secrets between him and Snow. Seeing Kiran's discomfort, Yvonne continued to tease, "I'm reminding you to cherish what you have. Otherwise, you'll regret it if you lose your happiness." "Do you have something to say?" Kiran asked coldly, deliberately showing displeasure. "Of course." Yvonne lowered her voice. "Lillian and I know about your misdeeds." "How do you feel?" Kiran. His face turned black as coal, utterly speechless. Yvonne, enjoying her victory, smiled like a triumphant general. Kiran took a deep breath and said, "Joshua is now the head of the Carter family. The development of Western medicine will go smoothly. You can work with him." "That's Snow's business," Yvonne replied with a playful smile. "She's pregnant, so you need to take more responsibility," Kiran reminded her. "Why should I? I'm not your servant," Yvonne replied, pretending to be upset. "Will you help or not?" Kiran raised his voice on purpose. "If it's a family matter, of course, I'll help," Yvonne said, making a grabbing motion with her hand. Kiran, seeing this, remembered a certain scene and glared at Yvonne. "Stop fooling around. Is it a family matter?" Yvonne asked with a mischievous smile. "You." Kiran was annoyed. "If not, then never mind." Yvonne pretended to leave, acting indifferent. "It is," Kiran said, annoyed and displeased. Yvonne chuckled, looking at Kiran with happiness. She knew that under the control of the love spell, Kiran had to accept reality and accept her. She snapped her fingers at Kiran. "Don't worry, I'll help take good care of Snow." Kiran nodded. "I'll go ask Lillian when we should leave." Yvonne nodded, her face showing a bit of reluctance. Kiran turned to leave. Yvonne boldly ran up, hugged Kiran from behind, and buried her head in his back, full of reluctance and care. Kiran said nothing but felt relieved. They were all family, dealing with family matters. He knew some things couldn't be changed. Lillian, in her room, sensed this emotion, feeling extremely conflicted but held back. Kiran walked in. Chapter 928, "When are we leaving?" Kiran York asked Lillian Yanez. "Are you ready?" Lillian replied, looking at Kiran. "I'm ready. I can leave any time." "Then we leave tomorrow," Lillian decided after a moment of thought. "Great," Kiran said, then tentatively asked, "Shall we have dinner together tonight?" "You can arrange that yourself," Lillian replied, not looking at Kiran. Kiran left and sent a message to Lindsay Ludwig, informing her that they would leave tomorrow and inviting her to dinner that night. Lindsay quickly responded with an okay hand gesture, simple but revealing her complex emotions. At 8 p.m., Kiran arrived at Kiss Western Restaurant in Dragon City with Snow Xander and the others. Their expressions varied. Snow and Yvonne Quinn were reluctant, while Lillian remained expressionless. Kiran, on the other hand, was filled with anticipation, eager to resolve everything. Lindsay was already waiting for them. Seeing them from a distance, she waved. Kiran noticed that Lindsay was with Wendy Kruger, which surprised him. They approached the table. Wendy, blushing slightly, greeted Kiran. "Young Master York, I heard you were leaving, so I came to see you off." "Thank you," Kiran replied, nodding. Wendy blushed even more, sneaking a glance at Snow, who was clinging to Kiran's arm. Wendy envied Snow's beauty and elegance, feeling that only a woman like Snow could match a hero like Kiran. "Wendy missed you. When she heard you were leaving, she cried," Lindsay said to Kiran. Kiran smiled and nodded, not saying much. Wendy quickly said, "I thought young Master York would stay at the traditional medicine clinic for a while. The renovation just finished and now you're leaving, which is unfortunate." "Stop making excuses, Wendy. Just admit you wanted to see him," Lindsay teased, then turned to Kiran. "We women all miss you, so if you have a conscience, remember to think of us." Kiran noticed Lindsay's changed demeanor. She was more open and bold. He smiled and said, "Of course I will. Besides, my wife is pregnant now." Kiran looked at Snow with deep affection as he said this. Hearing about Snow's pregnancy, Lindsay was shocked and instinctively looked at Snow. Snow smiled and nodded. "The miracle doctor said I'm pregnant." Everyone laughed at the title, "The Miracle Doctor," making the atmosphere more relaxed. They all sat down to eat. Halfway through the meal, a young man approached. He was about 5 feet 11 inches tall, with slightly dark skin and well-developed muscles, exuding a masculine aura. The young man's sudden appearance made the group uncomfortable. He, however, seemed oblivious and introduced himself loudly. "I'm Easton Moore from Belford. Nice to meet you all." Easton spoke politely, but his gaze lingered on Lillian, his eyes wide with admiration, almost as if he wanted to devour her with his eyes. Lillian exuded a noble and elegant aura that could easily drive men crazy, and Easton was no exception. Kiran had noticed Easton earlier. This young man was clearly trained in martial arts, with a solid foundation. His presence in the restaurant was unusual. Easton's table was just one over from theirs. Given his martial arts training, he had likely overheard their conversation. His approach was an attempt to pursue Lillian. Kiran looked at Lillian to see her reaction. Lillian picked up her teacup and sipped, ignoring Easton completely. Easton continued to smile at Lillian, his eyes fixated on her delicate hands as she drank tea. He began to swallow hard, barely concealing his desire. "Have you finished eating? If so, we should go," Lindsay said, not wanting Kiran to get into trouble. "I'm full," Wendy said, like a good girl. Yvonne said nothing, looking at Kiran. "I'm Easton Moore from the Moore family in Belford." "You can check on that," Easton said, trying to maintain his composure despite being ignored. "Let's go," Lillian said, standing up to leave. Kiran stood up as well, supporting Snow as they prepared to leave. Easton panicked and stepped forward to block Lillian. "Can I have your phone number?" Lillian began. Easton was surprised. He hadn't expected Lillian to give her number so easily and quickly started noting it down. However, the expressions on everyone else's faces were strange because Lillian was giving Kiran's phone number. Kiran, wanting to avoid trouble, didn't point it out. "Let's go." "I'll add you as a friend later," Easton called out to Lillian's departing figure. Lillian didn't respond. Easton took it as acceptance and felt elated. Outside, Yvonne was the first to laugh, her laughter like silver bells. Snow joined in laughing as well. "Kiran, check if he's already added you as a friend," Lindsay teased. Kiran was about to speak when his phone chimed. "It must be him," Yvonne said. Kiran pulled out his phone and saw a friend request with a message, "You're so beautiful." Yvonne peeked over and, seeing the message, playfully patted Kiran's face. "You're so beautiful." Yvonne burst into laughter and the other women joined in. Kiran shook his head, deciding not to accept the request. They drove back to the villa. Meanwhile, Easton stood by the window, watching them leave, eagerly waiting for his friend request to be accepted. Back at the villa, Lillian said to Kiran, "Buy tickets to Belford for tomorrow. We're going there." Hearing this, Kiran joked, "Are you going to see Easton Moore?" Lillian nodded. Yes. Kiran was stunned. Yvonne and Snow looked at Lillian, curious and puzzled. Lillian didn't explain and went to her room. Kiran shrugged, feeling helpless and confused. "Kiran, maybe you should capture Easton Moore and see if liking men affects the love spell," Yvonne teased. Kiran's head buzzed and he glared at Yvonne. Yvonne stuck out her tongue playfully and went to her room. Kiran called Lindsay to help book the tickets. Afterward, he took Snow for a romantic bath. Thinking about Kiran leaving made Snow feel uneasy. Just as they reunited, they had to part again, and they spent a long time in intimate embrace. Little did she know, their passion caused Yvonne and Lillian discomfort. Lillian had decided that for the foreseeable future she would make Kiran live like a monk. Chapter 929. Dragon City Airport. Take care of yourself, hubby. Snow Xander, feeling reluctant to part, looked at Kiran York with concern. Kiran's face was full of happiness. He gently stroked Snow's face and said, "Don't worry, wifey. Lillian is here." Snow glanced at Lillian Yanis, standing in the distance in a white gauzy dress, looking like a fairy untouched by earthly concerns. Unable to resist, Snow whispered in Kiran's ear, "Sister Lillian likes you too. I've told her a lot about you and she's very interested." Kiran was taken aback. Snow's face lit up with joy and shyness as she blinked at Kiran, signaling him to cherish the opportunity. Kiran felt speechless. He and Lillian would never be together. His heart belonged to Snow alone. The twist of fate with Cosner Aoki had already troubled him enough. How could he disturb Lillian? Lillian was the kind of woman who should be admired from afar, not approached casually. Kiran shook off his thoughts and turned to Yvonne Quinn, saying, "Thank you for taking care of things while I'm away." Yvonne shook her head and said, "I'm not suffering. I'm heartbroken and miserable." She then turned to Snow and said, "I envy you for winning his love. Sister Lillian and I are doomed." Snow, surprised by Yvonne's bluntness, felt a bit embarrassed. Kiran glared at Yvonne. "Take good care of Snow." "I'm not your servant unless you beg me," Yvonne teased, deliberately making it difficult for Kiran. Feeling helpless, Kiran said, "I think Dragon City will be quiet for a while. I'll come back as soon as I finish my business." "Go on, stop dawdling." "It's not like I'm going to mistreat Snow," Yvonne muttered, stepping closer to Kiran to adjust his clothes, then added tenderly, "Be safe and think of us." Kiran nodded. "Don't worry." After bidding farewell to the two women, Kiran followed Lillian towards the boarding gate. He turned back to wave at Snow and Yvonne. Snow's almond-shaped eyes were filled with affection and reluctance, while Yvonne's gaze was full of concern. Kiran and Lillian boarded the plane and found their seats. As soon as they sat down, they spotted a familiar face, Easton Moore. Easton, seeing Kiran and Lillian, was clearly surprised. His gaze naturally fell on Lillian. He quickly walked over and said, "Hi, you still haven't added me as a friend." Lillian, seeing Easton, showed a flash of annoyance in her eyes. She didn't speak but glanced at Kiran, signaling him to handle it. "You added my phone number yesterday," Kiran said directly, hoping Easton would back off. Easton froze, and then his handsome face turned angry, feeling humiliated. He turned to Lillian, wanting to question her, but she was looking out the window, ignoring him completely. Feeling deeply humiliated, Easton's anger turned to Kiran. You knew and didn't tell me." "You wanted to add me, not the other way around," Kiran replied, feeling like he was talking to an idiot. "You're playing me." Easton's anger surged, and he swung his fist at Kiran's head. Kiran, surprised by Easton's lack of manners, had already made it clear he wasn't interested in talking to him. Yet Easton was still angry and wanted to fight. Kiran, annoyed, grabbed Easton's hand and loudly reminded him, "We're on a plane." "Damn it, I'll kill you." Easton, failing to land his punch, felt even more humiliated and started cursing. "What's going on here?" A flight attendant rushed over, hearing the commotion. "He's in my seat," Easton said arrogantly. The flight attendant's face changed slightly when she saw Easton. She turned to Kiran and said, "Sir, could you please give your seat to Mr. Moore?" Kiran was stunned. This was his seat. Why should he give it up? He showed his ticket to the flight attendant. "Look, this is my seat." The flight attendant checked the ticket and saw that Kiran was indeed in the correct seat. However, she still smiled politely and said, "Sir, please give your seat to Mr. Moore." Kiran couldn't believe it. This was his seat. Why should he give it up? Easton's face was full of pride. "Did you hear that? Move!" Kiran's patience was running thin. He glared at the flight attendant. "Is this how you serve your passengers?" The flight attendant's eyes showed confusion and internal conflict. She knew that Easton was a regular on this route and had caused trouble before. Previously, flight attendants who stood up to him had been beaten or worse after the flight. Afraid of what Easton might do, she had no choice but to ask Kiran to move. Seeing the flight attendant's hesitation, Kiran understood that Easton was a rich, spoiled, second-generation heir who instilled fear in others. He sneered at Easton. Easton, feeling no guilt, arrogantly said, "Move now, or you'll regret it." Kiran scoffed and closed his eyes, ignoring him. Easton, furious, shouted, "Didn't you hear me?" He swung his fist at Kiran again. Kiran's anger flared. He grabbed Easton's hand again. Easton, unfazed, sneered. "You dare grab my hand? You're dead!" He tried to wrench his hand free, but Kiran tightened his grip. Ah! Easton screamed in pain, his arm going numb. Kiran threw Easton into a nearby seat. Barking dog! Easton was furious. He was used to being the king on this flight, with flight attendants at his beck and call. Being called a dog was a massive blow to his ego. Enraged, Easton shouted, "Damn it, I'll kill you." He tried to get up and attack Kiran, but his body wouldn't move. Easton's face turned pale with fear. "What did you do to me?" Kiran had shot a silver needle into Easton's chest, causing him to gasp for breath, his face turning white. "Is there a problem with my seat?" Kiran asked the flight attendant with a half-smile. Chapter 930. The flight attendant's face turned red with embarrassment, but she still looked at Kiran York and asked, "Sir, are you heading to Belford?" Kiran nodded. "Yes, I am. Then I advise you to be cautious. Mr. Morris, the young master of the Moore family in B. Belford." "I know," Kiran replied, glancing at Easton Moore. Easton's face had been full of arrogance, but seeing the disdain in Kiran's eyes, he grew furious. His eyes nearly popped out of his head, but he couldn't say anything and had to endure the humiliation. Ignoring Easton, Kiran turned to the flight attendant and said, "I want to tell you, in this world, it's not beneficial for dogs to rely on their power." The flight attendant's face flushed with shame. Kiran then looked at Easton. "A dog relying on its family's power is worse than a useless watchdog." Easton, hearing Kiran's taunt, felt his lungs about to burst with anger. His fists clenched repeatedly, but he managed to hold back. "Stop talking," Lillian Yane's voice rang out like a heavenly melody, warning Kiran. Kiran stopped speaking, but Lillian's voice captivated everyone on the plane with its beauty. The plane quieted down. Easton sat there like a clown, unable to speak and enduring the embarrassment. 2 hours later, the plane landed. None of the other passengers moved, waiting for Kiran and Lillian to disembark. They were filled with fear and awe for these two. Kiran and Lillian stood up and exited the plane. At the door, the flight attendant hurriedly stopped them. "Sir, madam, please cure Mr. Moore so he can move." "Oh, I forgot," Kiran scoffed, looking at Easton as if he were an idiot. He raised his hand, and with a flick of his internal energy, the silver needle in Easton's body flew out. "Ah!" Easton screamed, able to speak again. Easton was furious. "Damn you! You!" Kiran raised the silver needle in his hand, ready to throw it again. Easton quickly shut his mouth, too scared to speak. The people on the plane were once again shocked, seeing the once arrogant young master of Belford now terrified. Kiran and Lillian ignored everyone's reactions and left the plane, heading out of the airport. Kiran was about to hail a taxi when a low-key phaeton stopped in front of them. Kiran was curious. He knew no one in Belford. Could this be one of Lillian's subordinates? The car window rolled down, revealing Kate Gannon's smiling, charming face. "What are you doing here?" Kiran asked, surprised to see Kate. Kate's mature and graceful face was filled with joy, but hearing Kiran's question, she became annoyed and said nothing, starting the car as if to leave. Kiran quickly grabbed the car door handle and joked, "How can the car delivery girl leave? What did you say?" "Who's the car delivery girl?" Kate's eyes flared with anger, remembering the 2 times she had lent Kiran a car on the highway. "The car delivery girl is here. Of course, you're here to give us a ride." Kiran opened the car door and invited Lillian. "Sister Lillian, get iron." Lillian didn't say anything, but she felt a bit helpless. No one else could treat the revered inspector of Imperial Dragon like this. Kate huffed in anger, glaring at Kiran in the passenger seat. Kiran, unaffected, said, "Being this angry isn't good for you. It'll make you age faster." "Kiran, you." Kate was about to explode. "I'm just telling the truth. Don't be like this, or no one will want you when you're old." Kiran continued with a sincere tone. Kate's anger surged. She had come to pick up Kiran because she missed him, not expecting him to tease her like this. Seeing Kate's angry face, Kiran smiled mischievously and winked. Kate almost blew a gasket, taking several deep breaths to calm down. She glared at Kiran and said, "You have no conscience." "So, you finally admit you missed me?" Kiran teased with a smile. "You." Kate's face turned red, but she quickly composed herself and turned to Lillian. "Master Yanez, aren't you going to kill this worthless man?" "If I killed Kiran, could you bear it?" Lillian asked with a rare, playful smile. Seeing Lillian's smile made Kate feel even more nervous and conflicted. She glared at Kiran and said, "You vile man, I'll deal with you later." Kiran didn't respond but winked at Kate. "You can't beat me in a fight and you can't out-talk me. What can you do?" Kiran. Kate, furious, floored the gas pedal, wanting to crash the car and take Kiran with her. Just then, a convoy approached from the opposite direction. Kate reacted quickly, slamming on the brakes. Kiran pulled the handbrake, stopping the car. They all broke into a cold sweat. Kate's anger reached its peak as she yelled at the approaching cars. "Who are you people? Why are you driving the wrong way?" The driver of the first car, a woman, lowered her window and pointed at Kate. "Shut up, or I'll have you handed over to a man to play with." Kate's fury, already boiling, exploded at the woman's insult. "Are you looking to die?" Kate shouted, opening the car door to get out. At that moment, Easton Moore exited the airport and walked towards the convoy. Seeing Easton, Kiran smiled at Lillian. "Looks like we're running into trouble again. This should be interesting." Lillian also noticed Easton and sighed. "You always seem to stir up tea trouble. That's what makes life fun. Let Kate handle this scum," Kiran said, watching Kate as he took the driver's seat, locking the doors and windows, ready to enjoy the show.